forward. One statement in that particular clip that must worry all of us is the statement where he said, wait for surprises. What surprises does he have in mind?
That sounds very ominous.
Very ominous. Could these be military surprises, security surprises? We've seen already in the case of Benghazi today an explosion apparently detonated by a car at one of the arms depots. Those could be some of the surprises he has in mind, but there could be others. But I think a full accounting of the situation of where Libya is right now must start with the recognition that Libya, or this regime, has lost immense international legitimacy and domestic legitimacy. That is the starting point for SAFE to have a dialogue with the Libyans, to engage the Libyans, as opposed to come on the press and essentially...
So when he talks about, we know the West, we've got to be tough, that's a miscalculation on his part, is it?
A very big miscalculation. It suggests that even his friends in the West are either not talking to him or not explaining to him the magnitude of the challenge facing his father and himself at this moment. When President Obama comes out and says Gaddafi has to go, and naval assets are being moved into the Mediterranean, they lose their diplomatic immunity, their bank accounts are frozen. These are not small steps backward. We're going back to an era when Libya was isolated and under even lesser sanctions. But this is the reality, and this should be the starting point for SAFE to actually help inform his dad and actually find a way for him out.
Okay, Tarek Youssef, once again, thank you very much.
Pleasure.
You're watching Al Jazeera, bringing you extensive coverage of events in Libya and the Arab world. Still ahead, the role played by spiraling food prices in Libya's revolution. Could things get worse than they are now? And to Iraq, where protesters fed up with corruption say they're sorry they ever elected the government.
An uprising on the streets, showing no sign of relenting. Protesters united in their defiance of the regime. As demonstrations continued for a third week, President Mubarak remained unmoved. But how much longer could he ignore the demands of his people and hold on to power? In a day-by-day account, we look at the events that changed Egypt, from those that witnessed them firsthand. Fall of Mubarak, at this time on Al Jazeera.
A history of guerrilla warfare, a place on the global stage. They were an organization created for a stateless population. But before fighting for their land, why did the PLO fight for independence from their Arab neighbors? Chronicling the turbulent story of the struggle for a Palestinian homeland, PLO, History of a Revolution, at this time on Al Jazeera.
Welcome back. The top stories in Al Jazeera. Muammar Gaddafi's forces have launched a powerful attack to try and take back the closest opposition-held city to the Libyan capital. An explosion at an arms dump in Benghazi has killed 12 people. The depot is just outside Libya's second city. The injured were brought to a nearby hospital. Libyan rebels are claiming to have taken control of the Mediterranean oil port of Ras Lanouf. Doctors are reporting 1 death and 18 people with injuries caused by bombs or rockets. And forces loyal to Libya's leader have been trying to regain control of the closest opposition-held city to the capital. This footage was uploaded onto a social media website from AlJazeera. Now, the United Nations recently announced that global food prices have reached an all-time high. Nowhere is this more evident than in the lengthening bread queues in Libya. High oil prices and the rising cost of basic food could threaten future political stability. Tim Friend reports.
Not guns or missiles, but food. And in a protracted conflict in Libya, it could determine the outcome more crucially than any conventional weapon. Here in rebel-held AlJazeera, the baker, Agu Fakri, reveals that the use of food as a weapon by Gaddafi supporters has already begun.
Obviously, there's no stock of flour left. We had a small quantity coming from Tripoli, but it was taken back. We saw it on TV being brought as far as Sirte. We saw that the leader said the flour could come to the east, and then the flour was turned back by those highway bandits of his.
The World Food Programme is calling for urgent and safe access to Libya after a ship carrying vital food aid was unable to dock at the port city of Benghazi on the Mediterranean coast due to security concerns. The WFP has launched an emergency operation costing more than $39 million to provide much-needed food aid for Libyans inside the country and those who fled into neighbouring Tunisia and Egypt.
We were getting reports from those crossing the border into Tunisia just earlier this week about food being used as a potential weapon. We heard that some of Gaddafi's supporters were trying to deny some of the rebels food in certain areas. I mean, if they see any food trucks coming in, they may be able to stop them. And this is the last thing we want to see, of course, because food should be available to everybody.
Libya relies on food imports. A staggering 90% of all food supplies come from abroad. Many foreign workers are employed in farming and food production, but with migrants fleeing in their thousands, food supplies are suffering. But it's not only food. In 2000, more than a quarter of the population did not have access to safe drinking water. Global food prices have already reached new highs this year and could suffer the impact of further oil price spikes amid turmoil in Libya and the Middle East. Skyrocketing food prices were among the triggers for protests in Egypt and Tunisia. And once again, they're playing a central role in revolution. Tim Friend, Al Jazeera.
Now, we have some breaking news in from Egypt. We're getting reports that protesters are clashing with security forces in the coastal city of Alexandria. Crowds are reportedly surrounding the headquarters of state security. On the line now is Mohammed Sudan of the Muslim Brotherhood. He joins us from Alexandria there. Mohammed, what's the latest you can tell us about what's going on in the city there?
Yes, what happened this afternoon, some protesters came in the front of the building of security forces, and they were protesting, asking about the information about their relatives, because they have been arrested for a long time and we don't have any information about them. And that was very peaceful protest. There's no any, they didn't use any force in this, just shouting and just asking, need some information about the relatives. What happened a few minutes, they get no answer from inside the building, and then they try to open the door of the building. In this moment, some officers, maybe soldiers, go to the roof and they start to shout to against the protesters. I believe that we get 4 people injured, and they are now in a hospital. I believe it's very dangerous wound. I don't know the case at what time, what happened exactly to them, but the 4 being shouted, and I believe it's very dangerous case. I don't know exactly if 2 being